Every path in education leads somewhere. Every child is being shaped, formed, and transformed into something. The real question is not if transformation is happening, but who is shaping it and by what vision. Welcome to the 9 traits of a life-giving transformative educational model. And in this episode, we begin with the most foundational trait of all, the one that shapes every other decision we make, a biblical view of the child. Because how you see a child determines how you teach them, how you discipline them, and how you measure success, and ultimately, who they are becoming. So let's lay a foundation for this. When parents talk about education, they often start with curriculum. What program, what school, what method. But Scripture starts somewhere else entirely. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. The Bible mentions the heart nearly 1,000 times, not as a metaphor, not as a sentiment, but as a center of thought, emotion, motivation, conscience, and spiritual life. From a biblical perspective, a child is not just a brain to be filled or behavior to be managed or a future worker to be prepared. A child is a whole person, and education that does not begin with that truth will eventually be distorted. So why does this matter so much? Well, much of modern education across many systems rests on a very different assumption. It treats children as products of programming, responders to stimuli, machines to be optimized. And this view comes largely from behaviorist theory, which assumes there is no inner person, no soul, no heart, only conditioning. But Scripture tells a radically different story. Every child is made in the image of God, fallen by nature, destined for immortality, and created with a unique purpose in God's providence, and is of infinite value. That's a theological claim and demands a different kind of education. But the problem is we have a one-size-fits-all approach in many educational methods. There's an old story about a school for animals. In this school, every animal took the same 4 classes: running, climbing, swimming, and flying. Now, the duck excelled at swimming, but nearly failed school trying to run. The squirrel climbed beautifully, but was labeled disordered for struggling elsewhere. And the fox acted out in frustration in his classes. The elephant developed deep shame because none of the expectations fit him. The moral is obvious, but uncomfortable, because when we design education for a generic child, real children get lost. And a biblical view of the child insists that individuality is not a problem to overcome, but a design to steward. So what does train up a child really mean? We often quote Proverbs 22:6 when it says, train up a child in the way he should go. But the Hebrew word for train up is the same word used for dedicate. It means to narrow, to focus, to set apart intentionally. It does not mean forcing a child into a mold. It means paying close attention, observing, listening, studying, and gradually narrowing the path so a child can become who God created them to be, not who culture demands and not who comparison pressures, not who fear dictates, but who God designed. There's a story about Michelangelo that captures this concept beautifully. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, simply staring at a large block of marble. People thought he was doing nothing. But when asked what he was doing, he later said, I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free. That's the task of parents and educators. It's not to manufacture something new, but to see what God has already placed within. And a life-giving, transformative education does not impose identity, it reveals it, the imago Dei in each child. Here's the hard truth. Anyone who works with your child, any system, any teacher, any mentor, is operating from a worldview. And how they view your child will shape everything: expectations, discipline, pace, worth, and vision for the future. You cannot afford to assume alignment. You must discern it, because education is never neutral. So here are some questions for you to ask yourself about where you have your child and the model that you've chosen. As you consider educational options for your child, pause and ask, how does this model view the child? As an image bearer with a heart and soul, or primarily as a student, a performer, or a data point? Does this approach recognize the inner life of my child? Is attention given to their character, their conscience, motivation, and spiritual formation? How are discipline and correction handled? Are they aimed at heart-level growth or primarily behavior management? Is there room for knowing my child personally? Do teachers or leaders see them as individuals or as part of a system to manage? And what assumptions about human nature are operating here? Is my child seen as morally neutral, naturally good, or biblically fallen and in need of guidance? A life-giving, transformative education always begins with a biblical understanding of who a child is. So we begin here with a single clarifying question. Do I, and do the people I partner with, truly hold a biblical view of the child? In the next episode, we'll explore the second trait and continue tracing a path towards education that is not just informative, but life-giving and truly transformative, because every child is marble and someone is always carving.